Marcus Hale wiped a layer of grease from his fingers onto the faded fabric of his jumpsuit, barely noticing the worn patches and loose threads. The flickering hollow screen above his workstation displayed the same bleak report. Power reserves dwindling, water filters running at half efficiency, perimeter drones losing signal. Another day of survival on Erebus 9, a dead colony abandoned to time. The outpost had once thrived, a mining hub bristling with corporate ambition, but war and economic collapse had gutted it. The last evacuation ships left a decade ago, taking everyone who mattered. Marcus wasn't one of them. An engineer wasn't essential when the companies that paid him were bankrupt. So, he adapted, cannibalizing tech, repurposing broken machines, and keeping the power grid on through sheer force of will. He sat back, staring at the mess of components spread across the rusted workbench. A cracked servo motor, an old drone core with questionable software, and a salvaged transmitter. It was a puzzle, one he could solve, but the question gnawed at him. What was the point? There was no one left to use the drones, no one left to hear a distress signal. The silence of space had already answered him. A warning chime snapped him out of his thoughts. The colony's exterior sensors had detected movement. That was impossible. There was nothing out there but sand, rock, and remnants of a forgotten world. Marcus tapped the screen. The grainy image fed from a half-functional camera showed a shadow moving against the dunes, a shape too large and too deliberate to be natural. He reached for his sidearm. It was old, like everything else he owned, but the energy cell still had charge. Stepping toward the airlock, he hesitated, staring at the battered suit hanging by the door. If the atmosphere outside had degraded further, a simple breach could kill him in minutes. But something was out there. And curiosity more than caution made him move. The desert stretched endlessly under a dull sky, the remnants of a dying terraforming process failing to breathe life into the planet. Wind carried fine sand, coating everything in a layer of dust. Then he saw it. A figure stood motionless near the colony perimeter. Tall. Not human. Marcus tightened his grip on his weapon, every instinct screaming at him to retreat, but he had spent too many years alone to ignore the first sign of something, anything, not born from his own mind. The figure took a step forward, its movement smooth but deliberate, wrapped in intricate metallic armor that pulsed faintly with energy. The headpiece resembled an elongated helm, faceless but imposing. It raised an arm, fingers splayed open in a gesture that Marcus almost recognized as non-threatening. Marcus took a slow breath. His voice cracked from disuse when he finally spoke. "Who the hell are you?" The alien didn't answer. Instead, it lifted a small device, a sphere no larger than Marcus' fist, and let it hover between them. The sphere shimmered, then a voice, clear and resonant, filled the space between them. You are, engineer? Marcus blinked. He hadn't heard another voice in years. Yeah, he said cautiously. Last one left. The alien tilted its head, considering his words. Then it did something unexpected. It took a knee, bowing its head in what could only be deference. Then you are the one we seek. The interior of the outpost was cramped, cluttered with half-built machines, rusted tools, and old data slates filled with schematics that had long lost their relevance. Marcus motioned toward the only other seat, a makeshift chair welded from scrap. The alien did not sit. Instead, it studied the wall's eyes, if it had them, tracing the remnants of human ingenuity that had kept Marcus alive. After a long silence, it spoke again. We are Zalvoran. Marcus frowned. That name meant nothing to him. He folded his arms, leaning against the workbench. You're a long way from home then? The Zalvoran turned, studying him. Then it raised a hand and the shimmering sphere projected an image into the air, a world unlike any Marcus had seen. Towering spires of metal stretched toward storm-filled skies, ships of impossible design floated through artificial skylanes, and beneath it all, a civilization crumbled. We were great, the Zalvoran said. But we have forgotten how. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Forgotten what? The alien's gaze settled on the disassembled drone core on the table. To build. A silence stretched between them. Marcus let out a humorless laugh. You're kidding. No. You're telling me your entire species just forgot how to make things? The alien's voice held no emotion, no shame, only fact. Not forgot. Lost. Marcus exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead. He had spent years fighting against decay, against a world that was collapsing around him. Now he was looking at a civilization that had already lost that battle, but instead of dying, they had come to him. He should have felt disbelief. Instead, a different feeling crept in. They needed him. The night came quickly on Erebus 9, casting long shadows through the outpost as Marcus worked. The Zalvoran stood nearby, motionless but watching with an intensity that made it impossible to ignore. "You're gonna have to explain how the hell your people managed to survive without engineers," Marcus muttered, welding a connection node onto the drone's core. Machines were our makers. We commanded, they obeyed. When they ceased, we could not replace them. And now. Now we die. Marcus glanced at the alien, then back at the drone. He had been alone so long that the weight of responsibility should have felt unbearable. But the truth was, he had nothing else. The drone whirred as it powered on, the makeshift repairs holding for now. Marcus leaned back, watching its systems come online. The Zalvoran watched too, and though its face was unreadable, Marcus sensed something unspoken. Oh. Then the alarms blared. Marcus' stomach dropped. The exterior sensors were detecting multiple contacts. Not human. Not Zalvoran. He grabbed his weapon and looked at the alien, whose posture had shifted from passive to tense readiness. They have come. Who? Marcus demanded. The alien turned toward the door, its armor pulsing with renewed energy. Those who would see the last engineer dead. The sky above Erebus 9 burned. Marcus crouched behind a rusted barricade, his pulse hammering against his ribs as flashes of energy fire illuminated the wasteland outside the colony. The attackers moved like wraiths, sleek figures wrapped in dull, segmented armor that barely reflected the dim light. Not human. Not Zalvoran. Something else. The Zalvoran warrior beside him, the one who had called himself Veilrax, gripped a shimmering blade of solidified energy. He had not fired a single shot, nor flinched at the barrage that had driven them into cover. He merely watched, patient, calculating. Marcus checked the power cell of his pistol. Half charge. Not great. He exhaled through his teeth. You mind telling me who these guys are? Veilrax didn't look at him. His voice was cold but not unfeeling. Sadrin. Marcus swore under his breath. He'd heard the name. Even in the failing days of human expansion, the Sadrin hegemony had been whispered about in dark corners of supply stations. A species that thrived not on war but on acquisition. They took what they could not make, enslaving civilizations whose knowledge they deemed valuable. Let me guess, Marcus said, peering over cover. They heard I was something valuable. Veilrax finally turned his head, considering Marcus for a long moment before speaking. You are. A Sadrin soldier darted from the shadows, closing the distance impossibly fast. Marcus barely had time to raise his pistol before Veilrax moved. His blade sliced through the Sadrin's chest armor as if it were mist, the energy leaving no blood, only the stench of scorched matter. Another shape emerged, then another. Marcus fired twice, hitting one in the shoulder. It staggered, but only for a moment before recalibrating its balance and charging forward again. Marcus had survived Erebus 9 by being smart, not reckless. This wasn't a fight he could win. We need to move, he growled. Veilrax didn't argue. He grabbed Marcus by the shoulder and pulled him toward the nearest structure as more Sadrin poured into the colony. They ran. The workshop doors slammed shut behind them, the reinforced metal barely holding as something heavy pounded against it from the other side. Marcus bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Veilrax stood motionless, listening. The pounding stopped. A moment later there was only silence. They're not leaving, Marcus muttered, reaching for a nearby console. The power flickered as he activated the colony's internal sensors. The screen displayed a heat signature map of the area. The Sadrin weren't retreating. They were spreading out, searching systematically. They'll find a way in, he said. Veilrax's posture remained rigid. Then we do not give them time. Marcus rubbed his temples. You're gonna have to explain something to me because right now I'm struggling to understand what the hell is going on. Why do they want me? The Zalvoran's gaze settled on him, unreadable yet intense. Because you can create. Because you are the last of your kind who remembers how. Marcus let out a sharp breath. You're telling me this is about engineering? Veilrax gave a slow nod. To the Sadrin, knowledge is power. They have ruled for centuries not by invention but by taking. They claim what others have built, then strip them of the ability to rebuild. The knowledge of your kind was once beyond them. They believed it lost. Until now. Marcus gritted his teeth. It wasn't just about survival anymore. If the Sadrin took him, they wouldn't just be taking a man. They'd be taking everything he knew, every fix, every design, every crude workaround that had kept Erebus 9 running. And if what Veilrax said was true, the Sadrin wouldn't let that knowledge spread. They would own it. Marcus straightened. Then we don't let them have it. Veilrax regarded him for a long moment before inclining his head. How do we win? Marcus exhaled. He hadn't thought of himself as part of a we in a long time. But now he didn't have a choice. The colony's last functioning defense systems were buried in layers of dust, relics of a time when Erebus 9 had been worth protecting. Marcus moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, searching for anything salvageable. Veilrax followed, silent but ever watchful. They reached a maintenance hatch. Marcus pried it open, revealing a tangle of old conduits and a dormant defense drone, deactivated years ago. He smirked. Bingo. Veilrax watched as Marcus dropped to his knees and began rewiring the drone's core. The interface was ancient, the code barely legible, but Marcus understood it the way a sculptor understood stone. He worked fast. He had to. Once this thing is online, he said, it should be able to reconnect to the colony's automated defenses. If we're lucky, some of the old turrets still work. Veilrax nodded, though Marcus wasn't sure if he truly understood the mechanics of what he was doing. The drone whirred to life. Marcus grinned. That's more like it. He activated the controls, rerouting power to the colony's remaining turrets. The main display flickered. Several turrets were still operational. Not much but enough. Marcus turned to Veilrax. We just turned the tide. The Zalvoran's voice remained steady. Then let them come. The Sadrin were not prepared for resistance. The moment they tried to breach the workshop, the colony's turrets roared to life, spitting plasma into the sand. The first wave fell in moments, their armor cracking under concentrated fire. Marcus guided the automated defenses from inside, routing the drone's signal through old comm relays. It was barely holding together, but it didn't need to last forever. Outside, Veilrax moved through the chaos like a phantom, his blade slicing through Sadrin attackers before they could react. The enemy faltered. Then they fled. Marcus exhaled, watching their heat signatures vanish into the night. Veilrax deactivated his blade, stepping into the workshop, his armor streaked with burns but his stance unwavering. They will return, he said. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion creeping into his bones. Yeah, he admitted. But next time we'll be ready. Veilrax studied him then nodded. You are more than an engineer, he said. You are a force they do not yet understand. Marcus scoffed. That makes two of us. For the first time Veilrax almost smiled. Marcus turned back to the console. The colony's systems were fragile, barely functional. This wouldn't last forever. But for the first time in years he wasn't fighting to survive. He was fighting to build. And that, he realized, was worth fighting for. The air inside the colony was thick with the scent of burnt wiring and scorched metal. Marcus stood over a dismantled power relay, fingers deep in its circuitry, sweat gathering at his temples. The last battle had drained more than just the colony's defenses, it had drained time. The Sadrin wouldn't wait long before coming back, and when they did, they wouldn't make the same mistakes. Across the room, Veilrax stood near the main console, monitoring the perimeter scans with an unsettling stillness. The Zalvoran warrior had no nervous habits, no wasted movements. He was patience incarnate, but even patience had its limits. They are returning, Veilrax said. Marcus grunted, adjusting a wire that had long since lost its original insulation. Figured as much. Question is, how long do we have? Veilrax didn't answer immediately. His helmeted gaze remained fixed on the screen. Not long enough. Marcus exhaled sharply. He didn't need details to know what that meant. The colony's jury-rigged defenses had bought them time, but not safety. The Sadrin would come back stronger, and when they did, bullets and turrets wouldn't be enough. Something had to change. He stood, wiping his hands on his tattered jumpsuit. All right, I need to see something. Veilrax watched as Marcus moved past him, stepping through the rusted corridors of the outpost. The lights overhead flickered, the electrical grid struggling under the weight of systems never meant to last this long. He reached the heart of the colony, the old fabricator bay. The machines were ancient, their exteriors coated in dust and neglect, but they were still there. If he could get even one of them working, they could manufacture weapons, armor, anything that could turn the tide. Marcus moved to the nearest terminal and powered it on. The screen buzzed weakly to life, displaying an error message in faded text. Primary blueprint database corrupted. Restoration required. Asterisk asterisk. His stomach twisted. No schematics, no templates. The colony's entire manufacturing archive was useless. Veilrax loomed behind him. It is broken. Marcus frowned, rubbing his jaw. No. It's missing. The Zalvoran warrior was silent for a moment. Then quietly he said, "The High Ascendants would not approve of this." Marcus turned his head. Who? Veilrax's posture shifted slightly as if debating how much to say. They are the ruling caste of my people. They do not build. They only command. Marcus narrowed his eyes. And they don't want anyone else to build either, do they? The silence was his answer. A bitter laugh escaped Marcus' throat. Your people forgot how to make things because someone wanted them to forget. Veilrax did not argue. Marcus' hands curled into fists. It made sense. If an empire was built on automated systems, on machines that obeyed without question, then whoever controlled those machines controlled everything. A ruling class wouldn't want engineers. They'd want priests, people who worshiped technology but never understood it. Marcus exhaled through his teeth. We're fighting two wars, aren't we? Veilrax nodded once. Against the Sadrin. And against my own kind. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. He had spent years alone, scraping by, thinking survival was the only goal. But now he was standing at the center of something bigger than himself. The Sadrin wanted to control him. The High Ascendants wanted his knowledge erased. Neither of them were going to get what they wanted. He straightened. We need those blueprints back. Veilrax studied him. The knowledge exists, but it is sealed away. Marcus crossed his arms. Then we break the seal. Veilrax hesitated. It will not be easy. Marcus let out a humorless chuckle. Nothing worthwhile ever is. The Zalvoran command vessel loomed above Erebus 9, a dark monolith against the storm-laced sky. Marcus stood in the cargo hold of a Sadrin shuttle, arms crossed, eyes locked on the approaching landing bay. The plan was reckless, maybe even suicidal. But if they wanted the blueprints buried within the Zalvoran archives, they had no choice but to steal them. Veilrax stood beside him, silent but poised. The shuttle's stolen identification codes had gotten them past initial scans, but it wouldn't hold forever. The ship shuddered as it docked. Metal groaned. Then silence. Veilrax's blade ignited with a low hum. Marcus gripped his modified plasma cutter. Asterisk asterisk, a tool-turned weapon in desperate hands. Asterisk asterisk. The door hissed open. They moved. The halls of the Zalvoran vessel were cold, pristine, and sterile, a temple dedicated to a civilization that no longer understood the machines that carried them through the void. Marcus worked quickly, hacking into the nearest terminal, fingers moving with precise intent. Access denied. Figures, he muttered. Veilrax tilted his head. They will have physical archives deeper in the core. Marcus smirked. You could have led with that. They pushed forward, weaving through dim corridors. The ship was massive, yet eerily empty. The High Ascendants rarely left their sanctuaries. Their enforcers, the Void Wardens, were their only real opposition here. An opposition was coming. The first Void Warden emerged from the darkness, towering and draped in ceremonial plating that gleamed like obsidian. Marcus barely had time to raise his weapon before Veilrax moved. Asterisk asterisk, a flash of light, a pulse of energy, and the Warden crumpled. Asterisk asterisk. More followed. Marcus fired, the plasma cutter's beam slicing through armor seams. Sparks and blood filled the air. Veilrax fought like a force of nature. Marcus fought because he had no choice. They reached the archive chamber. Marcus slammed a data spike into the terminal, overriding security protocols. Unsealing archives. A shudder ran through the ship. An alarm blared. They know we're here, Veilrax said. Marcus gritted his teeth, watching the data pour onto his device. Blueprints, schematics, forgotten designs that had been locked away for generations. He had it. The doors behind them exploded inward. Void Wardens surged in, weapons raised. Veilrax stood firm. Go. Marcus clenched his jaw. Not without you. Veilrax's helmeted gaze met his. You are the future engineer. I am only its shield. Then he turned, blade igniting, and charged into the fray. Marcus ran. The stolen Sadrin shuttle tore through the void, Erebus 9 growing larger in the viewport. Marcus gripped the controls, his knuckles white. He didn't know if Veilrax was still alive. But he had the blueprints. And he would build. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, human hands held the future of an empire. The air inside the colony was electric with the hum of machinery long thought dead. Sparks flared as Marcus welded the last of the stabilizers into place, sweat rolling down his forehead, breath tight in his chest. The blueprint archives he had stolen from the Zalvoran vessel were spread across the holotable beside him. ****, a treasure trove of lost knowledge ***, buried for generations by the High Ascendants. He had spent days deciphering them, nights rebuilding what the Empire had let decay. Now, standing in the heart of a newly awakened war foundry, he was no longer just a man trying to survive, he was building something that would outlast him. The first warship in centuries, one made with human hands. Footsteps approached. Marcus didn't need to turn to know it was Kaeldar. The young Zalvoran commander had come alone, his usual contingent of warriors absent. He carried himself with the weight of someone who had seen the future and realized it no longer belonged to his kind. "You've done the impossible," Kaeldar said, voice low. Marcus exhaled through his nose. "Not yet. But I will." Kaeldar stepped closer, his gaze sweeping over the ship. It wasn't massive like the Empire's dreadnoughts, nor sleek like the Sadran raiders. It was something different. A warship designed to be repaired, to be modified, to be understood, not just worshipped like a relic. "The High Ascendants know," Kaeldar said. "They've declared you a heretic. They say you defile the sacred machines." Marcus let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Yeah. Machines don't seem to mind." He patted the hull, feeling the solid weight beneath his palm. "What about you? You still believe in their lies?" Kaeldar's jaw tightened. "I believe in survival. And you, engineer, are the only one ensuring that we have a future at all." Marcus turned fully to face him. "Then help me finish this." Kaeldar nodded. There was no hesitation. The war had already begun. The first Sadran battleship arrived just as expected. Marcus stood on the bridge of his unfinished warship, fingers tightening around the control panel as the colony's sensors screamed warnings. The Sadran had not come with diplomacy. They had come to erase him. Kaeldar stood beside him, eyes fixed on the tactical display. "They won't wait. The moment they realize our ship isn't fully operational, they'll strike first," Marcus finished. He ran calculations in his head, scanning the limited weaponry they had managed to install. Not enough. Not against a fleet designed for conquest. His mind worked the way it always did, puzzle pieces, connections, solutions. He had built this ship to last, but lasting wasn't enough. It had to fight. A second warning blared. More Sadran ships arriving. The High Ascendants had called for their extermination, but the Sadran had no intention of sharing the glory. A fleet battle was about to erupt over a barren world where no one had thought victory was possible. And Marcus Hale, a forgotten human engineer, was at the center of it. The first shots came like thunder. The Sadran cannons ripped through space, lighting the void with fire. Marcus braced against the shaking hull, shouting over the alarms. "Return fire. Target their engines." The ship answered his command. New weapons, built by his hands, not ancient doctrine, came to life. Railguns fired in sharp bursts, their impact hammering into the Sadran's forward vessels. Plasma cannons followed, turning shields white-hot until they shattered. For the first time in centuries, a Zalvoran warship fought back. Kaeldar's voice cut through the chaos. "They're adapting. Bringing their heavy destroyers forward." Marcus's mind raced. They couldn't match the Sadran in brute force, but brute force had never been his game. He had built this ship differently. "We won't win a slugging match," Marcus said. "Time to do what they don't expect." Kaeldar shot him a sharp look. "Which is?" Marcus grinned. "Fight dirty." He slammed a command into the console, activating the one system the Sadran had never seen before. The ship split apart. Not from damage, by design. The Sadran had spent centuries fighting an empire that only knew how to replicate the past. They expected massive, lumbering war machines. They did not expect a ship that could break into modular attack craft, moving independently, coordinating like a single entity. Marcus had built a fleet out of one ship. The Sadran hesitated, recalibrating, confused. It was all the time he needed. The modular ships weaved between enemy fire, tearing into the Sadran with precision. Where their enemy was slow, they were fast. Where the Sadran relied on doctrine, Marcus relied on adaptation. Plasma beams tore through enemy hulls. Missiles found their targets. Sadran warships that had crushed entire civilizations buckled under an assault they did not understand. The tide was turning. But Marcus wasn't finished yet. The High Ascendants watched from their distant sanctuaries, untouched by the war they had refused to fight. When the first of their temples began to fall, they sent desperate transmissions. Asterisk, you are breaking the sacred balance. Asterisk, asterisk, you do not understand what you are unleashing. Asterisk, asterisk, cease this at once. Asterisk. Marcus did not answer, because for the first time their words meant nothing. The people who had once bowed to them were now watching the impossible happen. They were watching their fleets win. They were watching an empire wake up. And Marcus knew what came next. They would try to stop him. Not with weapons but with fear. They would call him a heretic. A threat to their way of life. They would say he had no right to change their destiny. And he would answer them the only way an engineer could. By building a new one. The last Sadran battleship burned in orbit, its wreckage streaking across the planet's sky like a dying comet. Marcus stood on the warship's bridge, watching the destruction below. The battle was over. The war was just beginning. Cale there stepped beside him, silent for a long time. Then he said, "What now?" Marcus exhaled. His hands were still stained with grease, his mind still filled with blueprints. "We rebuild," he said. Cale there nodded, but his eyes were sharp. "The High Ascendants will never accept this future." Marcus smiled. "They don't have to. Because the future no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the ones who built it." And Marcus Hale, the last engineer, was far from finished.